Good afternoon and welcome to this last episode in the Energy Markets Week. My name is Patrick Baudouin and I'm the organizer of this session. If you're watching this episode live on our Enlit Europe platform, you can interact with us via the chat box on the right side of your screen. And also don't forget to hit the yellow register button on the right side next to this video so your profile shows up. This way it's easier to network and interact with the other attendees. Now, over to our moderator of today's session, Doug Wood. He's a board member of the European Federation of Energy Traders and one of our most experienced moderators as well. Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Patrick. Welcome to everyone.
Welcome. You're just for the occasion, Doug.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the. This is to remind anyone who falls asleep and wakes up in the middle of the panel session. This is to remind you what we're talking about today. But I hope that doesn't happen. First, thanks to you. Sorry, Patrick, you're going to say.
No. Go ahead. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Just going to say thanks to everyone at Enlit for organising the panel session alongside EFET, and it gives me great pleasure to moderate this. It's certainly an exciting and busy time. This year, we've seen pronouncements from the European Commission on the hydrogen strategy and the roadmap, on regulation of renewable and low carbon gas markets, energy system integration. There's been debate about inclusion of low carbon gases in the Renewable Energy Directive. And now we're in the middle of a big consultation on the hydrogen and gas markets decarbonisation package with responses due tomorrow. We're expecting a major package of proposals to be published by the Commission on 14th of July or thereabouts. And we're going to have draft legislation on hydrogen and gas markets in Q4 this year. So there's an enormous amount going on and some very complex issues, which are still deep in discussion at the moment, and time is marching on. So it's really important we make progress in understanding how it's all going to work so that the necessary investments can take place and the preparation can take place. So here to join me today to discuss this, I have three distinguished experts who are all very active in this space, and I'm especially pleased to welcome an all-woman panel to discuss this with you today. First, we have Ilaria Conti, who is head of gas at the Florence School of Regulation and is often a moderator of such discussions. So I'm going to be very pleased to hear her answer questions instead of her asking them of me. Next, we have Felicia Mester, who has recently joined Hydrogen Europe as a senior policy advisor, though she may also be known to you for her previous work with Eurogas. And we also have Giuseppina Squicciarini, who is head of regulatory and external affairs at Shell, although she is also on the board of EFET and a leader of the markets committee at Eurogas. So she is extremely well plugged into the debate here. So welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. If I can just kick off with some initial impressions from each of you. Let me just start off with a general question to capture the mood of where we are before we get down to some specific questions. And tell us each of you, what are the biggest issues on your plate right now for developing a hydrogen market in Europe? And what should we be focusing on first to get things moving? And I think, Juicy, you have a slide in place, and if we get the slide up, perhaps I can ask you to start with what are the big issues on your plate.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be in this panel today. So, what are the biggest issues? Well, let me start by saying that the European Union's target of cutting carbon emissions by at least 55 by 2030 puts it on a clear path to climate neutrality on net zero by 2050. And at Shell, we definitely support the historic agreement on the first EU climate law that will make these targets legally binding. And we are busy playing our part in helping to achieve them. And we are working with our customers to accelerate the transition to net zero. So you were mentioning before the big consultation about the hydrogen gas market package, and we believe that that offers a major opportunity to get the framework for gas decarbonization right. We think it should be placed in the context of the EU climate neutrality objective, and it should be closely aligned with the Fit for 55 package. So being a bit more specific, what do we need to achieve a regulatory framework for hydrogen and gas market fit for 55? So there are 4 main points I would like to make, and those are the ones you also find in the slide. First of all is consistency across the EU. A consistent regulatory framework to enable a coordinated investment in supply, demand and infrastructure, leaving some flexibility to adapt to local circumstances and market evolution, but fundamentally a coordinated regulatory framework. Secondly, we believe there is a need for an EU-wide framework which enables the integration of increasing volumes of renewable and low carbon molecules. Decentralized renewable and low carbon production will need access to liquid markets for molecules and to an EU-wide integrated market for GEOs and certificates. Thirdly, the hydrogen framework should cater for both the blending pathway and the hydrogen networks pathway. We are actively working at Shell with grid operators in multiple countries on blending. We think the blend is one of the intermediate ways we are working on to supply clean energy at scale and decarbonize. And what is important is to work with regulators on an enabling framework, including gas quality and interoperability requirements. Finally, but importantly, we think that the new regulatory framework for gas and hydrogen should build on the lessons and the success of the gas liberalization and enable a level playing field through unbundling rules, third-party access and transparent cost-efficient tariffs. We made huge progress as an industry in the third package in building a regulatory framework which is conducive to competition, and we think we should really build on that.
Thanks, Juicy. That's very clear. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those points. There's some very interesting points in amongst that. Ilaria, can I ask you for what's on your plate at the moment, and what are you concentrating on?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for the invitation to today's debate, and thank you also for this question, because it helps us understanding a bit where we are. We've been discussing about hydrogen decarbonization for, I feel, like every day for a couple of years now, but of course now, as you pointed out in the introduction, it's probably time for action, or at least for an acceleration of action, so to move a little bit from vision to more concrete steps. In my plate at the moment, FSR is involved in the debate of the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance initiatives. We are present in 2 tables there, one on hydrogen production generation and the other one on hydrogen transportation and distribution. So we are closely following this debate evolving. As you know, this is an initiative co-organized by the European Commission, bringing together the industry in order to discuss and possibly arrive at a selection of projects in hydrogen to see the light, obviously with a tight time plan. And right today, there was actually the Hydrogen Forum where an assessment was made of these proposed projects. And we found out that more than 1,000 proposals were submitted. And actually that most of them are considered eligible at the moment by the Commission. Then clearly not all of them will see the light, but certainly it's a very strong sign of how things are evolving. So we are definitely following this debate, and at the same time we are researching on the critical topics, particularly regarding policy and regulation of the future hydrogen market. So we are strongly working towards the publication of the Fit for 55 package that you mentioned, and also the legislative package expected by the end of the year.
Thanks, Ilaria, and I'm grateful also because you have, or the FSR has facilitated a number of debates in this area and has published, and that's been some extremely important contributions to helping us discuss and understand these things. So please keep that up. And Felicia, if I can turn to you also, you have a new agenda now. You've been working on hydrogen for some time, but this is really about hydrogen. What's changed, and how are you? What are you focused on now?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me here today, and I kind of want to continue ride the same wave that Ilaria started, Indeed, we have almost 1,000 large-scale development projects planned, of which 85% of which are hydrogen production projects with electrolyzers that are essentially ready to go once we'll develop the needed renewable electricity for it. And with that, I kind of want to say that, well, this is essentially what's keeping us busy, ensuring that projects can fly. And here, of course, in Hydrogen Europe, we very eagerly wait for the Fit for 55 package to come out and for to see what the Commission is brewing for us in the RED II. And here, of course, from an additionality perspective, from a renewable electricity perspective, we're looking to have enough renewable electricity to have those principles created and designed in a way that the industry can work with them, can work with the regulatory barriers that are currently created by very stringent rules of this principle. We're also looking at a reform guarantees of origin system, slightly different to the one that Juzi mentioned a bit earlier. We're actually looking for a distinct hydrogen GO, hoping that that will bring a bit more trackability and traceability into the system. And of course, we're looking at an increased target of renewable energy in order to make sure that we can produce all that the green hydrogen. And in addition, of course, we're looking at a carbon market reform and ensuring that we have a higher CO2 pricing so that finally consumers are incentivized to move to cleaner alternatives and shift away from fossil fuels. But most of all, we are working on a dedicated hydrogen for a dedicated framework for hydrogen that indeed should be based on the success of the gas industry. It should be based on the principles of unbundling, of TPA, and so on and so forth. However, we think that hydrogen is a very strategic energy carrier in the hydrogen strategy, in the European Green Deal. It merits its own dedicated framework with demand and supply side mechanisms and so on.
That's great. You made a number of points that I'm very keen to get back to, Felicia. And I noticed that I noticed that Hydrogen Europe has published recently on additionality and temporal alignment and so on, and that's something I'd like to pick up a bit later. And your point about with how broad can GOs be. But let me start and let me turn to Ilaria first of all to raise a comment that was raised both by Juicy and Felicia. And indeed, in a recent interview, Walter Boltz was commenting that extending gas rules to hydrogen was probably the most practical way to make quick progress in establishing a hydrogen market. Would you agree with that? Do you think we are best starting this with something as close as possible to natural gas regulation, or is this the opportunity for something entirely new? To go for a different approach and wipe the slate clean?
Okay, that's a great question, Doug. Yes, I would say I agree with Walter, because it is indeed the most practical solution, but also probably the one which would bring the most benefits in a short time. As you know, I think nobody really wants to redraft an entire regulation for anything. So certainly, if we want to really see even accelerating as I said, the move from vision to action, I think we have to look for practical solutions. And in this sense, starting from what we have and what proved to work pretty well for the natural gas market, so the core pillars, the main principles that are the gas market currently revolves around, I think it's a great start. And Felicia already mentioned third-party access, unbundling, creating a level playing field as to enable as much competition as possible. All of these principles should be applied to the nascent hydrogen market since the start. Clearly, there are some differences because the legislator had a completely different situation at the time of the third energy package in approaching the single energy market for gas, for natural gas. Now we are in front of something pretty unknown. I don't want to say a blank sheet of paper because something is already there, but certainly a market which is nascent, which is based on many pilot projects rather than concrete ongoing commercial projects at scale, and also with basically limited, if no, infrastructure connecting demand with so demand and supply. So let's say that the core, so the main framework should be the one we currently have for natural gas, but we also have to look at the future with some flexibility, and indeed there are regulation in particular has to be dynamic and flexible, as also some papers, recent papers from Acer and SEER stated. So what does it mean? It means that, first of all, there are already some exemptions already existing in the current regulation, which could be applied, some instruments which can simply be enabled. And also we can think of a dynamic approach to regulation, meaning having some temporary exemptions, limited in time, limited in scope. This is something we will have to deal with, at least in a transitory period, for sure.
Thanks indeed, and of course one of the key areas that will be different will be, of course, the use of instruments such as guarantees of origin and certificates to promote investment in both supply and demand for renewable and low carbon gases, as well as the necessary investment infrastructure. So if I can turn to Juicy now, of course, we've already got the beginnings of guarantees of origin as an instrument to promote renewable electricity. How easy is it to extend that to hydrogen? Should this be extended to low carbon also, which was a debate that's been going on within the RED 2, RED 3 discussions? And how would that market operate?
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. Very good question. So our vision is for a pan-European cross-commodity certification system, facilitating a European market for both electrons and molecules. So why is it important to enable a pan-European market for all kinds of electrons and molecules? We think that it's essential to let the green value emerge from the market, so that it can provide an additional revenue stream to green projects and foster the decarbonization effort under the Green Deal. So your question is then, what do we need? So what we need, in our view, is to extend the guarantees of origin system to molecules, all molecules. And clearly the existing RED 2 geo system, which is restricted to renewable gases, does create a significant market fragmentation. And in particular, RED 2 includes an obligation to issue GOs only for renewable gases, leaving to member states the option to issue or not GOs for low carbon gases. And this implies a two-speed system and a fragmented market, which penalizes the development of low carbon molecules. The second element that we think is important is to enhance the GOs by including standardized carbon footprint information to enable comparison of sources. So disclose the environmental impact of the different options and let the end user choose. We work with our customers every day. They have different preferences and they want to choose. So we should let the green value emerge through the demand pool and through the consumer's choice. Thirdly, it's about enabling free trade across borders in an internal market based ideally on book and claim. And finally, also enabling the cross-recognition of certificates across the different systems. So we have now EUTS certificates, GEOs, and the sustainability certificates. The way forward for us would be to allow for GEO upgrade to include GHG and sustainability information, allowing cross-sectorial recognition and use for targets compliance. We have different certificates serving different purposes now, certificates for disclosure to customers and certificates for target compliance. The RED 2 revisions offer an opportunity to link these different certificates. We still need them and accept that they are different and separate, but they can be linked in a more consistent and robust system.
Thanks. Now, Felicia, you're in a slightly different space here, because where Juicy was talking more about a standardized geo that could apply across the widest possible vectors, geographies. You're arguing more for a specific hydrogen-based instrument. Is that just a short-term expedient thing to get things moving, and ultimately you see this converging, or do you see this as a kind of permanent thing for hydrogen that is quite different for other vectors?
Yeah, well, Doug, I want to make sure that that it's clear that it's not just Hydrogen Europe, obviously asking for a hydrogen geo. During the FastGo consultation, the entire hydrogen industry spoke with one voice and said that we need to have a dedicated hydrogen geo. And of course, it's great. The idea of having a pan-European certification system is a very good one in principle. However, we don't live in a perfect world, and from a Hydrogen Europe perspective, we think that the current book and claim system, with the way that it operates, decorrelating the certificates from the physical volumes, allows and kind of bringing all the gases together under one pan-European, say, energy carrier. It's somehow good, but at the same time, it doesn't really convey the trustworthiness that end consumers, in our opinion, should have. To put this into perspective, today's geosystem, well, or a geosystem with a pan-European or all-inclusive of all gases, theoretically would allow for biomethane volumes to be used to green gray hydrogen consumption. This would be possible if there would be one harmonized system for geos for all gases, which would include hydrogen within the same boundaries. Whilst many, and I understand the argument of avoiding market fragmentation and ensuring greater uptake of biomethane and hydrogen on one side, the reality is that a system designed, a book and claim system designed in this way would divide the very principle that capacity that was produced actually exists and that production took place. So we think that we need a separate system for origins of origin for hydrogen, where we could have the hydrogen purity. We also think that there should be a GHG emission footprint, a geographical component as well. But it is very important to have a distinct system to account for hydrogen. From the perspective of extending it to low carbon, absolutely, we absolutely agree on this point. All gases, all energy has to be, its origin has to be proven, so it should be certified. That is not even a matter of discussion. But in terms of how we look at the markets right now, yes, we look at everything that is blended, everything that is linked to natural gas or to methane in a way, should be part of the gas world, of the gas rules, and everything that is pure hydrogen should have a hydrogen network, a dedicated regulatory framework as well.
Thanks. You made a point there about blended gases, and one or two of you mentioned the possibilities of blending as a way forward. Ilaria, do you think there's a market for blended gases? Is there a rationale for injecting hydrogen into existing gas networks as opposed to keeping it special for pure hydrogen users?
Well, blending is certainly one of the most debated topics these days. As Florence Kuh, we replied also in this sense to the consultation which is ongoing, and you mentioned, Doug, that will close tomorrow, that we do not really see a bright future for blending. We think that it's a useful instrument, of course, to start the market uptake, to start, say, the ball rolling, but we see it as a merely temporary solution. This is mainly based on practical / rational / academic reasons, looking simply at the chemistry and the efficiency of this process. We know that by blending hydrogen with natural gas, the physical characteristics of these two gases get mixed up in a way which is neither efficient nor convenient. So we think that, again, it is a solution, it's a short-term solution. So in that sense, we cannot really say about the market. Maybe there's a market for such products, but we think it's simply not a long-term viable solution to enable the real decarbonization of the market.
This reminds me of some of the discussions we used to have around the gas target model, when there was clearly a difference between the identifying the dot on the horizon that we were trying to steer towards and what actions could be taken now, which would move us in the right direction to get there. Do you see?
That's sorry, just to add, no, because it is the point, because if you listen to different voices, if you read different studies, everyone of course has a different opinion. I'm just quoting the IEA because of course having forecasts till 2050 is of course quite difficult for everybody, even the ones with the best instruments. But just thinking about, I attended the International Association for Energy Economists conference last week, and there was an interesting input from the IEA, where gas, of course, from their latest net zero scenario, which would see gas growing until 2025, then starting to reduce till 50% of today's volumes, and then in 2050, we will have the same volumes as we have of natural gas today, but decarbonized. So I think, well, everyone is probably now familiar with this scenario by now, even though it was published only a few days ago. But I still think that it's a very important, it provides a very important vision of what the evolution of gas trading will go through in the next few years. And there's also not really an agreement on the sectors which will attract most of the demand, for example, for hydrogen. On this as well, the opinions vary a lot. We know that the steel industry is certainly one of the sectors which will be more likely to be decarbonized in the sense with hydrogen. But again, you know, the discussion is still open about the hydrogen clusters, how big they will be, where they will be placed, and so on and so forth. But I must say, with today's hydrogen forum, well, at least a good overview, a good picture of, even in geographical terms, of where hydrogen should or will or could be placed in the near future was displayed. And particularly I liked the picture, the graph showing the geographical distribution of projects, which was quite uniform. I would have expected a much more centralized distribution of projects, whereas you could see a very green, from light green to dark green Europe with upcoming projects in renewable hydrogen. So again, there's a lot of work to do, and we are probably not going in only one direction, but it seems that the target is clear now.
I'm also reminded of early discussions many years ago on natural gas, when it was thought to be too valuable to be used in power generation. And this is when you allow the market to optimize, it can make some decisions that change as the technological capability changes and the supply and demand changes. But just to stick on blending a little bit more, because Juicy, you talked about blending pathways in your introduction. Does that the timescales you're thinking about similar to what Ilaria was talking about, or do you see a more permanent?
Very happy to comment on that, and perhaps to come back as well also on the geo points from a hydrogen developers point of view, so the people from the ground. So in terms of the blending question, so As I said before, we really believe that the hydrogen framework should cater for blending pathway and the hydrogen networks pathway. For us at Shell, helping to change demand, helping our customers is critically important. And we are partnering with our customers, with businesses and with others to address emissions, including in sectors that are difficult to decarbonize, such as aviation, shipping, road freight, and industry. Partnering with others includes supporting government policies to reduce emissions sector by sector. It also means having the regulatory framework that creates that level of optionality across blending and across hydrogen. Initially, there will be a need for, at least in parts of Europe, to enable for blending, simply because hydrogen networks will be developed, is going to be developed, but it will take some time. So we will need to enable both pathways and making sure that blending is one of the intermediate ways to supply clean hydrogen at scale and decarbonize. So we would like to emphasize the need for an enabling regulatory framework that ensures unhindered cross-border flows and allows for cost-effective management of different mix of gases and qualities. And when we're examining the gas market regulatory framework, which is what we are doing now in the gas and hydrogen consultation, it will therefore be important to include in the review of existing rules a system operability to ensure proper cross-border coordination, as well as rules on gas quality standards. On the guarantees of origin point that came up in the discussion before. So for us as a hydrogen developer, it is important to ensure that we have a robust system that includes all kinds of electrons and molecules. And yes, it needs to be trustworthy, it needs to be robust. We fully recognize that, and we fully want that, because otherwise we are losing the trust of our customers, which is paramount for us. So very much about creating a resilient, robust and trustworthy system so that customers can have confidence on the origin of the energy they consume. However, we have to recognize that gases are fundamentally different from off-grid fuels, and as they are transported through the grid, in which consignments cannot be physically separated. So we can track injections into the grid and withdrawals from the grid, but once molecules are injected, they are free to move into the one single logistical facility, which is the EU grid. So what we need is to ensure that there is a common recognized standards across the EU and proper market oversight. In essence, we need to overcome the existing fragmentation of different system at member states level and build an EU-wide system which avoids double counting without requiring the tracking of transactions of physical molecules into the grid. And this is achievable. It's achievable through the adoption of a common standard and the same processes by national issuing bodies.
Thanks. I just wondered if Felicia, you also talked about book and claim versus a mass balance system, and whether how that was practical in terms of hydrogen. Is that the key determinant?
Yes, Doug, we talked about it quite at length, and of course there are very big differences and we support a book and claim system. At the same time, we think that it should be reformed in a way that there is a very clear distinction what can be done and what cannot be done. And from our perspective, as I said, it's not trustworthy if you produce biomethane and you count it against hydrogen production that was never produced, essentially. So those kind of things need to be accounted for, and whilst it's true that we can track the injection point and the rest, as Juicy said earlier, that is quite clear, but it's not just about that. It's about what happens with the certificate, not only with the physical flow. And there has to be a clear rule as to who can use them and who cannot.
and still independent tradability. But how do you address the greenwashing accusation that if you have them fully independently tradable, then if I'm in Poland and I'm buying a Portuguese renewable hydrogen GOO, then how, you know, is that not just greenwashing? I'm still going to be burning dirty fuel, grey hydrogen, or
Was this a question to me? I was having
sorry.
the impression. Sorry, I was having the impression that it's a question to Ilaria. Well, how do we account for that? Essentially, we account for that by having separate geo systems and ensuring that at least what was produced can be that we're comparing like for like, essentially. That if we produce green hydrogen somewhere, it can be used against gray hydrogen consumption, and it can be balanced out. If you produce biomethane, that's absolutely fine. You use it against your natural gas consumption. But the point here is that you absolutely have to make sure that you are fully transparent to the end consumer, and what was produced is used against the right consumption.
And that's absolutely right. It needs to be fully transparent for the consumer. GEOs allow for that because there is a possibility to specify the type of energy, the location, the production. All the information can be contained in the certificate. But I think, Doug, your point about how do we make sure there is no double counting is the fundamental point, and that is regardless of where you have a system for all molecules or separate systems, you still have that point. And that is the point that is absolutely important to tackle to build a trustworthy system. So as I was saying before, for us it's very important to make sure that the system is robust. And what creates the issues today is the fragmentation. If you have different systems and different standards across Europe, it is extremely difficult to make sure that these systems talk to each other, are consistent, and things do not fall through the cracks. So what we would like to see is a system that is European-wide, is trustworthy, avoids double counting, and has proper oversight, with adopting a common standard. And of course, it will need to be tailored. For example, electricity cannot be exactly the same in molecules, but the fundamental standard can be the same and the fundamental system can be the same.
I'd say there's one. I agree, these things are essential to ensure credibility as well. But we must remember that the GEOs are really on the supply side, on the production side. And there is still a question about whether the consumers understand that they may not get those particular molecules delivered, even with a mass balancing system, unless there is a direct pipeline between the production source and your consumer site. The system will be optimized. And do you think consumers as yet understand that? Or we have some work to do to make sure that people understand that they are still contributing to a decarbonisation agenda, even by sponsoring developments on the production side, even although they may or may not be consuming those specific molecules.
Is there a question for me?
As anyone who would like to.
Okay, I'm happy to go first. So obviously, I mean, in forums like this, we talk about consumers, yeah, but in reality what we see on the market is different type of consumers, and there are consumers that are extremely sophisticated and they have got very clear requests about what kind of product they want, being that renewable electricity, being that hydrogen, being that biomethane. So it is about making sure that the regulatory framework provides for the possibility for suppliers to offer different kind of solutions and to work with the final consumers on the best way to decarbonize their demand. And some consumers, we've seen that, for example, with electricity on corporate PPAs, will want to have a more direct link between their consumption and their investment. Others will be more flexible in terms of what kind of decarbonization solution they will want to adopt. So the important thing is to leave the options for the consumers to decarbonize their consumption in the way that works best for them, and in a way that is fully transparent. They know what they're getting, they can choose, and they can trust the system, because the system is going to give them what they're buying.
We've had a number of questions come in actually from the audience. I'd like to pick up one or two of those. Perhaps we can pick up two together. As one was, how quickly will hydrogen become cost competitive, and what specific support is needed in the meantime for the gas industry to change from natural gas to a hydrogen economy? Perhaps Felicia first, and then Ilaria. How quickly will how long will it be before hydrogen becomes cost competitive?
I think the question is, how long is it going to be until we're going to have a competitive CO2 pricing? That is also the question, because it plays a very big role. But I think the most important thing is to look ahead to the Fit for 55 package and the decarbonization package that will enable the right rules and clear standards that will ensure that we have clear additionality principles, which means that all those 1,000 projects that Ilaria and I talked about, recalling what was said in the Hydrogen Forum today, can actually fly. We need to look at 2024 and ensuring that we can meet those targets. And once we meet those targets, once we get production up to speed, we will see a decrease in the price of hydrogen, most likely. So in Hydrogen Europe, we are looking at 2030 to actually have, well, I wouldn't say in a liquid and affordable and sustainable market, but to have the basis of the market laid down.
Ilaria, is that the timescale you're?
Again, there is no agreement. Actually, there's wide disagreement. But what we can see, I mean, what we can witness is that things are moving. And as I said, on the market side, we are seeing this big pipeline of projects coming up. And actually, of the 900 plus that are considered eligible, 2/3 are due to would be ready to enter into to go live, let's say, between 2021, which is today, and 2024. So I would say from this perspective, it seems that the hydrogen economy is starting already. At the same time, we all know about the initiatives on the infrastructure side, the big hydrogen backbone project. So I would say that looking at the recent announcements, we could say that the market is preparing itself. I mean, the energy sector is preparing itself to the change. Obviously, huge question marks still remain about competitiveness, and in this direction also some of our studies have been going. Big question mark, the availability of renewable electricity to produce this green hydrogen in the future. And even today, in the conclusions of the Commission, we read that 84% of the projects are electrolyzers, which could produce renewable hydrogen, even according to the latest threshold included in the Delegated Act in the climate for the sustainable taxonomy. So this famous 3%, below this 3%. But in fact, this all depends on the availability of renewable electricity, because we know that if electrolyzers produce hydrogen with other types of electricity, then it's not formally renewable hydrogen. So big question marks, which led to the famous topic of taxonomy and terminology, which is also in our mind one of the first important topics which deserve clarification. And we hope to see this in the Fit for 55 package, particularly when it comes to revision of the RED II.
Thanks. And Juicy, the second part of that question was what specific support might the gas industry need in order to be encouraged to move from natural gas to hydrogen? Do you have any views from your on how that on what kind of measures could be taken?
So
this is a carbon price, as Felicia said.
Yeah, so what we need, we think, is an enabling policy framework which provides sufficient incentives and predictability to support investment across the value chain in a coordinated fashion, because that's an important point. It needs to be coordinated across the value chain, because otherwise you can, if you don't have at the same time production, infrastructure, and the demand pool, there is something that is going to miss, and it's not going to work. So the reform of the ETS should deliver, we hope it will deliver, a robust price signal so that the ETS can play a major role in reducing carbon emissions. But price incentives on their own will not be enough to drive renewable and low carbon investment at the scale and the pace required to get to net zero. This is where we think there is a major role for the Renewable Energy Directive. And a rapid change in demand can happen through sectoral mandates to stimulate the lead markets for low carbon energy, such as hydrogen.
A popular question that's come in that we've been speaking around a bit, but there's a kind of specific angle to this I'd like to pick up. In order for hydrogen to take off, we need standards for hydrogen quality and safety of transportation and storage, as well as certification of origin and carbon intensity, which each of you have mentioned, and the importance of having consistent standards applied, particularly to allow cross-border trading. But the question ended with something that I thought was very interesting. It says, please comment on where we are with this. How do you think, do we think this is well understood, and are you confident that that will be in the Commission's legislation, or it is in the interest of member states to do this? Where I turn to Felicia first, because you volunteered to ask the question, but maybe you had something different in mind, and I've asked you something very specific. Where do you think we are with this?
Well, I think we're all hoping that we are in good shape with this, Doug. I don't think nobody knows what the Commission is brewing for us. And yesterday, I got my hands on a RED 3 leak, and I have to say it was not what we were expecting in Hydrogen Europe. I hope that they're thinking about it. Indeed, it is important to have standards. It is important to have the certification of origin and make sure that it is a trustworthy one. Where they are with this, I think only they know. We can hope that it's going to actually be put into place.
And Jussi, I think you volunteered next. Are you confident that these issues are sufficiently understood, yet that you're confident we will have them addressed under the hydrogen and gas markets package, or is that something we should emphasise in our consultation responses?
So all I can say is it's definitely the kind of issues that we are facing in our projects. So I mean, as you know, most of you will know, I mean, there are already live projects that we are working on, working with partners to integrate offshore wind with hydrogen to realize, for example, our first green hydrogen hubs in the Netherlands and another electrolyzer at our refinery in Rhineland in Germany. So these are definitely the issues that we see on the ground. And I have to say that I saw in the last few weeks an increasing attention also in the European-wide debate on some of these issues. So, for example, on the issues of gas quality, or on the issues of interoperability and allowing for cross-border exchanges for either hydrogen-only networks or gas networks with blended hydrogen. So they are definitely part of the debate, but I would agree on that. There is definitely work to do to make sure that they are an essential part of the package in clarifying, for example, the roles and the responsibilities So where does who is responsible for example, keeping a certain level of purity of hydrogen in the networks? How is that? How are the costs for that allocated? What kind of comfort will, for example, the network operators be able to offer to the end consumers about the products they are withdrawing at the end of the withdrawal point? So these are extremely important questions that sound very technical, but are actually extremely needed in the debate to make sure that the whole value chain works. And we move from vision to action, as you said at the beginning, Doug.
I'd like to come back to some of the physical things, because we often ignore and concentrate just on the certification and so on, but not without giving Ilaria an opportunity to react if she had something she wanted to add in terms of the.
I think the discussion was going into was heading towards another very interesting topic that we are observing, that is the change of roles of the various actors in the energy system in the future. So we started, and your question was absolutely correct and fair from the audience, asking whether anybody is thinking about the consumers when it comes to safety issues and so on. And this is an absolutely well-placed question. My answer would be that I'm sure somebody is taking care of this for the upcoming legislative package. On the other hand, shouldn't this be the case, this someone is being reminded constantly, and lately also from by regulators, by energy regulators, for example. A recent paper by the Council of European Energy Regulators clearly states that the future energy system should be consumer-centric, so the consumer should be at the center of the energy system. And this is also, by the way, perfectly in line with the energy system integration strategy by the Commission, which you may remember the graph putting the consumers at the center, and then all the different energy vectors and infrastructures serving the consumer. So consumer awareness is and will be increasingly important, not only because there are sophisticated customers, as Giusy rightly pointed out, but also because this is something which will be inevitable in the future energy system for everybody, to have more information and more transparency. Other actors that are changing role are certainly TSOs and DSOs, and Giusy already mentioned that they will have to probably deal with new tasks, such as ensuring gas quality of gas which will be flowing in the pipeline, which will be different, better coordination in this sense, but also DSOs are now in the spotlight, because as we know, biomethane injection happens at the distribution level. So we are definitely going to see changes in this sense in the role of actors, and it's important to keep track of that and ensure that these changes happen in a consistent way, and ideally in a European framework, let's say.
We're beginning to run out of time now, so just a last question to each of you. And some final comments on where we are. And I guess it's the big question that we see from some of the naysayers, and it's do we need a hydrogen market? Aren't markets passé? You know, the markets are yesterday's way of delivering things. Aren't we better at achieving decarbonizations by governmental direction? What do you say to the naysayers? How can we ensure that markets remain at the heart of this policy, and to by helping them to deliver and work well, that we can deliver these objectives? What do you have to say? Let's I think I'll start with Felicia and then Ilaria, and I'll give the last word to Giuseppina. Do you believe in markets still, Felicia?
Thank you, Doug. Yes, absolutely. I think I think the internal gas market has proved that having a secure and affordable supply, a liquid supply, is of utter importance. So I think the concept of having a market, a robust market, has really proved itself. So yes, we absolutely need a hydrogen market. We absolutely needed to build on those lessons learned of previous molecules. And of course, consumers must be at the center. We live in a digitalized world, and the energy future of tomorrow has to absolutely be based on a climate neutral idea, on having the CO2 as the main currency of the energy system, but also as having a liquid supply for the consumers.
Ilaria?
Well, the simple question to do we need a separated hydrogen market would be not at any cost, meaning that being hydrogen a gas, just like other types of gas, it should be possible to make sure that it is integrated as much as possible into the existing system. So in this sense, even in regulatory terms, regulatory and policy terms, we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Particularly, we shouldn't start a priori by saying, okay, this hydrogen gas needs a specific separated regulation, but trying to build on what we already have, and as I said, identify when it's the case to have exceptions and exemptions as well, and temporary solutions to facilitate the market uptake. So hydrogen for sure is has been elected somehow as one of the gases that is more versatile and more useful for the decarbonization of the energy system. Let's remember that in the overall vision of Europe, electrification goes first, and then decarbonized gas follow electrification in those sectors where it's not possible or efficient to use electrification. So I think the big picture has to be kept in mind, but I'm sure that hydrogen will be duly integrated in the future.
Thank you, and I give the last word to you, Juicy.
So the simple answer is yes, we will need a market for hydrogen. And the reason why we need that is because of optimization. So we will have supply, we will have demand. I said before about the need for proper incentives to develop the full value chain. But we will need markets in the middle to ensure optimization, which means ultimately cost efficiency, which means ultimately affordability and value for the end users, for the consumers. And finally, the last point I would like to make, going back to the very beginning of my intervention, we learned a lot through the liberalization processes of both electricity and gas. And the lessons we learned that is that if you have a working market, you can deliver security of supply, efficiency, and we need to add decarbonization to the mix.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. I'm pleased to see we have an amount of consensus around a number of things that we like the idea of markets still. I think there's a question of how we can move immediately to a fully integrated market, because there are many moving parts between electricity and gases and between the gases within that. And it was interesting to see the support for the level of support for the understanding of the existing rules for gas markets being a useful starting point, because it's known to consumers, market participants, authorities, financial institutions, and so on. So there's good reason to start with what you know, unless there is a very good reason to move away from it. And the importance of standardization, not only of physical attributes, but also of certificates and instruments to allow a truly pan-European hydrogen market to develop, so that we don't lose the benefit. So there's a lot of common ground there. There's obviously still a lot of work to be done on the detail where the devil lives. But that's what we're all engaged in at the moment. So it just leaves me to say thank you to you all for participating, and thanks to the organisers. And I think I just hand back to Patrick for a quick second of housekeeping. Patrick, please.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks to all the great panelists for the insights you shared. This was the last episode in our Energy Markets Week series. All sessions have been recorded and made available on our online platform, enlit-europe.com, in case you missed them, so have a look there. Keep using the platform to network with each other after this session ends. Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you at the Enlit Europe event in Milan on 30 November until 2 December. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.